Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black entrepreneur experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. We are so excited to have Peabody nominated and award-winning digital media studio founder and CEO of LWC Studios. Welcome, Juleyka Lantigua.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your business?
Sure. Well, thanks for the chance to talk to your audience. I am an old school journalist. I came up the media ranks through print and online about 25 years ago. And I have had basically every job in publishing, in magazines, in newspapers, in books. I was the managing editor at Honey Magazine, at XXL Magazine, at Giant Magazine. I edited books at Random House, and I had the lifetime honor of writing the very last cover story of the print issues of Jet Magazine. And so I live and breathe the written word. I am a storyteller to my core. And about 5.5 years ago, I fell madly in love with podcasting as a medium for storytelling and as a fresh way to enter into what I thought was a really dynamic space that mixed journalism, storytelling, biography. And so I was very fortunate that I had just been recruited to head Code Switch at NPR. And what I did was I basically apprenticed myself to our producers and our editors so that I could learn everything. So I'd come in, with a pretty good pedigree in print journalism, but I knew very little about audio and how to make audio and how to tell stories in audio. And so I literally would sit side by side with our producers and just learn and take it all in and ask a lot of, I'm sure, were annoying questions. And then shortly after, I realized that even though I'd made it, quote unquote, to the summit, which is to work at headquarters at NPR, I was still asking permission to tell stories that I knew were important to tell, principally stories of Black and Brown people in the US. And that was really disheartening. And so I thought, I need to be the change I want to see in the world. And so I talked it over with my family and talked it over with God and put my faith, exactly where it needed to be. I borrowed $40,000 for my own life savings, my 401k. I signed up to be a Lyft driver and I started my company. And for the first 2 years, I was a Lyft driver and a CEO. And I paid my very first employee sometimes out of my Lyft earnings when, invoices were not coming in on a regular basis. And then 2 years later, I was able to put myself on salary and I was able to really build something. And now we are, tiny but mighty, making shows that I think really matter, making shows that erase margins, which is our mission, to really, do away with all of these artificial dividers that people have so that we can just enter into really meaningful and, life-changing conversations with one another.
What is something that we don't know about the podcasting industry that we should know?
That's a great question. I'm going to say two things. One is that the way we measure success in podcasting is wrong, because we measure success by the number of downloads, and that is categorically wrong. The math doesn't math on that. A download is only equivalent to 60 seconds of audio listening. And on average, we lose 30% of listeners between minute 2 and minute 5. And so if an average episode is 26 minutes and a download is only 60 seconds, we're not counting things correctly. More importantly, a download doesn't represent the actual consumption, how much people are actually listening. So on average, people listen to 50% of an episode. And so the math is just completely wrong. So I have for years advocated removing the download as the end all be all of measurements in podcasting, because it's simply wrong. It doesn't give us a true picture. The second one is that whenever you see a headline about podcasting, you have to automatically assume it only applies to the top 1% of podcasts. Period. End of story. And sometimes it only applies to the top 0.0001% of podcasts. And so there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of mid to small size companies like mine that are really the lifeblood. I compare it to the American economy. the Fortune 100 companies always get the big headlines, but they represent less than 5% of the US economy. The bulk of the US economy is made up by small businesses, people like you and me. And so it's very similar in podcasting. The big fish, the big whales always get the most publicity, they get the big headlines, they get the cover stories, but in fact, they really don't represent any significant majority of the creative force that is podcasting.
You talked about erasing margins and telling the story of people of Black and brown hue. And I know you have been in this space for a minute, but share one story that is so profound that you have shared.
How to pick one. Okay, I'll tell you about this incredible Black woman in St. Louis, Missouri, who we chronicled in the first season of 70 Million. So 70 Million is a show that I created to really reframe the conversation around criminal justice reform in the US. It was underwritten by the MacArthur Foundation for 5 years. We're 50 episodes deep. And in its first season, it was nominated for a Peabody. It has won multiple awards. And in that first season, we talked to a woman, a single Black mother in St. Louis, Missouri, who had been put in jail for 30 days because they accused her of fraud because she was making $28 more than would allow her to qualify for public assistance. So when whomever figured out, oh, you're making $28 more, that's fraud, they put her in jail for 30 days. So her daughter didn't have her mother. She was in what's called the workhouse, and the workhouse was a notorious jail throughout the state because of its decrepit living conditions, because of basically its inhumane treatment of the people who were in custody. And so she was basically suicidal. And she talks about how she, after being there for a couple of weeks, could not see how her life was worth living anymore because of what she had to endure. And she came out of there barely, barely willing to try again, to live, to sort of put herself back together, but determined to basically, as she says, burn it to the ground. And she rallied people. She became a one-woman protester outside for weeks and weeks and weeks. Protests grew around her. Pro bono lawyers got involved. Civic organizations got involved. 2 years later, the city hall passed a bill to shut down the jail and to reallocate the $20 million that it was costing them to run the jail every year to youth services. Now, that's a story that we need to tell over and over and over again, right? Because it sits at the crux of not just all of the injustices that compound the lives of so many people in the US, but it also epitomizes what one person is capable of achieving once they decide that this is what I'm going to achieve. So those are the kinds of stories that we seek out and that we relish telling and that we're so honored to tell,
That is awesome. Fill in the blank. Thank you, pandemic, because
everybody learned what we already knew, that working from home is the bomb. We had been working remotely from home as a team for 2 years prior to the pandemic, and we are happier, healthier, more productive. And so when everybody was freaking out about having to leave the office, we were like, welcome to the good side.
I love it. There are so many brands and businesses that are dominating. Talk about a brand or a business that's dominating that you admire and why.
Oh, wow. That's a really, really good question. A brand that is dominating that I admire. I'm going to give you a really nerdy answer, honestly, because I've seen them grow and I've been with them for the entire time. And that's Simplecast. So Simplecast is the company that we publish our shows on. And they invited us as a company to come on board as a client when they were still in beta many, many years ago. And, you know, one of their co-founders reached out to me. They walked me through what their plans were. They walked me through how they were going to differentiate themselves. They really did a great job in saying, you know, you're small and you're growing, we're small and we're growing, and we're going to do this together. And they have really stayed true to that promise. They have been incredibly supportive, incredibly responsive. And right now they are easily among the top 3 platforms for podcasting worldwide. And so I'm incredibly proud of them because they decided who they were early on, and they remained that same company that really cares about creators and independence, and is always innovating and looking at ways in which they can better serve us through gathering analytics, through expanding their reach, through expanding their services and improving their technology. And so I always recommend Simplecast because they, to me, really epitomize what's possible when you put resources into supporting work that is really valuable, and that is, you know, transcendent of, you know, the P&L and the quarterly reports.
Advice you wish you had followed.
Oh, this is easy. I wish I had not been a solo founder. So now when people come and talk to me about starting companies, I always say, get at least one co-founder. Ideally, I would have had 2 co-founders, because now I very clearly see the 3 core areas of my business. And it really would have been wonderful to have one person responsible for each of those core areas. No one gave me that advice specifically, but it is advice that I give now that I wish someone had given me, because the solo journey is intense and it is not for everyone. But if you have someone who is as committed, who is as visionary, and who is willing to make, you know, the big sacrifices, there's so much more that you can do faster just because there's 2 or more of you.
Talk about raising capital. How did you raise capital to start your company?
I didn't. I borrowed money from my 401k. I decided that since Black women only get 0.02% of all VC funding, I wasn't going to spend a year going to meetings and pitching. You know, it takes an average of 200 pitches for you to get your initial investment from anyone. And I have children. I had a husband then. I had a mortgage. I had real life responsibilities. I couldn't take a year off to go on a pitching tour. And so instead, I gave myself that same year. I said, you've got a year, 12 months. And if not, you're going to go get a job. You're very employable. So give yourself a year. And so I did that. And because again, I had real life responsibilities, I signed up to be a Lyft driver. So I was working on my company 9 to 5. I was taking care of my children from the moment they got home, dinner, bath time, bedtime, and then I would go and drive 3 or 4 hours every night, and then all day Saturday, all day Sunday on holidays. And in between, I was taking client calls from my car in between fares. I was stopping at different restaurants to edit things. Oh, like it was an adventure, you know, to be the roaming CEO around the DMV area, completely incognito. Nobody had any idea that, you know, here I was, a little media mogul or aspiring media mogul driving this little red car.
And so you talked about being a hybrid entrepreneur. Would you recommend that?
A hybrid entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm. And that's when individuals working their 9 to 5 and also building their business.
Absolutely, I would recommend that. 100%. One, it really forces you to be disciplined with your time, because there are only so many hours in the day. And if you have the responsibility of having to perform at your job, the time that you get for yourself, you will really optimize it because it will be limited. There's also safety in you taking the big risks for your company, but being able to have a steady income to make sure that your life, is not deeply impacted, that you don't end up couch surfing, and things like that, especially if you have a partner or a spouse and children and real world responsibilities. And so that's what I would do. I would absolutely recommend that people give themselves, a 6 to 18 month runway to set up their company, to get the product tested, to get their services aligned, to do all of the things before they officially launch publicly. Because there is a lot that you have to set up so that your business really, really functions well, right? Like if you, I pay taxes in 5 different states. Like my business pays taxes in 5 different states. I have full health insurance for, the entire vision, dental, medical for my entire team. There's all of this infrastructure that you have to set up right at the beginning, right? And so those things take time because it's not just you who are responsible for doing those things. So I would say 6 to 18 month runway before you quit your job and do your company full time. And I also would say, I didn't do this, but again, I would have done it. I would wait until you are making a little bit of money, not until you're profitable, because it takes years to become profitable, but until you're making a little bit of money and you've got a couple of contracts before you quit. That's what I would also do, which I didn't do, but I had, I was doing Lyft for like 40 hours a week. So I essentially had a full-time job.
And in this environment that we're in right now, when you talk about becoming a hybrid entrepreneur, a lot of companies so I want you to speak specifically to that entrepreneur out there that's trying to decide. So a lot of companies want you to divulge that you have a side hustle or what you're doing on the side, and that could create some challenges. Others, depending on the business circle you're running in, they don't feel you're committed if you have a 9 to 5 plus you're trying to build your business.
So it depends on your non-disclosure agreement and your employment contract. If you don't have an employment contract, you're not really obligated to disclose anything. And if you are going into a field that is not in direct competition with your employer, I don't see the advantage or the necessity to disclose unless you are going to be, underperforming, missing deadlines, not really showing up the way you're supposed to show up at your job. Like, don't let that happen, obviously, which is why a longer runway, is really important, because you'll be able to use your weekends, you'll be able to use your evenings, you'll be able to take time off when you need it. And so if you pace yourself over a longer period of time, the impact on your regular job is probably going to be lessened. But I would really look at the legal requirements of your employment contract or non-disclosure or non-compete that you might have.
That's good. Talk about your top 2 mentors or influencers and what lessons did they teach you?
Oh, really? I can't pick 2. There's no way. I've had mentors my entire career. I seek them out. I beg them to be my mentors. And so I'm not going to pick 2 people. I'm going to talk about 2 types of mentors that I seek out, because I think that for me, it's been really important to, at different stages in my life, identify the type of mentoring that I needed. And so, when I was coming up as a young journalist, I needed mentors who were seasoned, who were reporters, who knew about interviewing, who knew about doing research. So those mentors served me really well as a young reporter, someone who was starting out in media. But later, as I became more senior, I needed mentors who were leading, people who were heads of departments, who were directors, who were in the C-suite, so that they can help me think bigger about my career, so that they can help me see, well, where do I want to be in 5 years or 10 years? And then the mentoring needs changed when I became an entrepreneur, because I'd never had a company before. And so I immediately, when I founded the company, set up an advisory board, because I needed to have a formal, organized way to get advice from people. And so my company has always had an amazing advisory board. We meet officially twice a year as a board, but every month I have a 30-minute call with each of our advisors that's just scheduled on, uninterrupted. Like, I need that time with them to keep them up to date on what I'm doing, to ask for their advice, but I also call them and email them, and they're all in my Slack. So I have immediate access to them all the time. And so the type of mentor that I seek really depends on what my goals are for that year or for that particular 3 or 4 year period. And they change. Right? They absolutely change. Some of my mentors have been with me for 20 years. Some of them have been with me for 20 months. My latest mentor is someone who just retired out of a major Fortune 100 company. And she was a really, she was like the chief marketing officer there. And I met her at a dinner. And I went up to her after she introduced herself and I said, "You're amazing. Can you please mentor me?" And I explained to her that I want to really up my executive game, that I really want to not just have the title of Chief Executive Officer, but really embody the principles of that, really embody the leadership at the level of that. And that I thought she did that really impressively. And she said, "Oh, I will absolutely mentor you." And so now I have this incredible person as a mentor, because that's what I need right now. I need someone who has 20 plus years of executive experience to really groom me so that, I can serve on boards and I can be on that level. That's where I want to be in the next 4 or 5 years, And so mentors shift depending on what I want and how I want to grow.
That's amazing. And when you talk about an advisory board, speak specifically about how many advisors you should have and how do you vet those advisors?
A great question. So I like odd numbers. So we have 5 to 7 people on the advisory board. Typically, they serve for 3-year terms, and we pay them a small honorarium every year because we pay everybody, not extravagantly, but we pay people because it's important to compensate people for their time and their knowledge. And so when I was setting it up originally, I looked at what the categories were where I was deficient or where I didn't want to only depend on my own perspective. And so initially had several people who were in media, in digital media specifically, had people who came from tech, because we are essentially a tech company, had people who came from audience development, had people who were just straight up business owners who were not in media at all, but who just had very successful businesses. And so I looked across basically the concentric circles that form the core of my company. And I found mentors and advisors in each of those areas, in each of those competencies, so that together I could present an idea or a plan and get feedback from these people who were highly specialized in their knowledge.
What book would you recommend and why?
Oh my God, you're asking me all these questions where I could give you so many answers. All right, I'm literally looking around on my bookcase right now because there are so many. Okay, I would say start with Why by Simon Sinek, Sinek, is philosophically and foundationally a really important book for founders. Because for me, my why is not getting rich. My why is not becoming famous. My why is not external. I don't have investors. So my why is not to make them triple their money, right? So I had to be very clear, because this is by far the most consequential professional thing I've ever done, which implied one of the greatest sacrifices of my life, I had to be really super clear about why am I doing this? And so, start with why is a really good read, because it really helps you to whittle away all of the, I would say, fictional or superficial things that we think are reasons to do things. And then you really have to get down to, well, why am I doing this? And so my why became very clear to me. And my why was principally my own freedom. I wanted to be free from the constraints of working for other people and depending on other people and having to perform to basically secure my livelihood. So my first why was my own freedom. I also wanted the freedom to create based on my own ideas, to test those ideas in the marketplace. And then my second why became erasing the margins, right? My second why became the purpose of my work is to get people to see what happens when we just focus on telling the actual story. What happens when we just focus on the actual story and nothing else? And so once those two whys were really clear to me, I was unstoppable.
Let's talk about legacy. When it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
So I got a nickname last year, which I love, from one of my mentees, and I don't usually share it publicly, but I love it so much, and it perfectly encapsulates what I want to be remembered as. So she called me and she said, "Oh, I just needed to talk to my podcast auntie. Do you have a minute?" I burst out laughing and I said, "You have no idea how much I love that. Like, that's it. That's all I ever want to be. I want to be the podcast auntie, the one everybody calls when they need advice and they need help or they need, some truth telling. I am happy to be the podcast auntie." And so I've shared that little nickname with a couple of other mentees, and they laugh uproariously because they're like, "Oh my God, that is exactly who you are." One of them was like, "You should get t-shirts made." I was like, getting t-shirts made. So I want to be the podcast auntie. Like, I want to be the person who helps other people to find their way in this industry, because this is a place that is just exploding with potential and it is just starting out. And so I want, to get the text when somebody does something major. I can't believe I did this. We talked about it 6 months ago. I want to get the call in the middle of the night, somebody crying happy that they sold their company. Like that, I want to be that person behind the scenes that has watched all these superstars, sort of come up, and who by extension then has really helped our industry be reflective of all of the talent that's in the industry.
Let's talk about gratitude. And I want you to have a thank fest.
Oh my God. Okay.
You have at it.
Okay, so I walk in gratitude every day. I'm very aware that I am extremely blessed. So first and foremost, thank God that He has always held me very closely in His grasp, and I'm very aware of His presence daily in my life. So He's first. Thank you to my children and my ex-husband, who in many ways helped me to fulfill one of the greatest destinies of my life, which was to be a mom to two amazing little humans. Thank you to my siblings who have always believed in me and supported me. Thank you to my team. I call them the Avengers because I really do think that they all have superpowers, which of course makes me Nick Fury and, with an eye patch, but that's okay. My team is just absolutely incredible. So thank you to my team. It is an honor to just be their representative, honestly, because at the end of the day, we know that they don't need me, and they know that I know that they don't need me, and that's okay. I can live with that. Thank you to all of the people in podcasting. Oh my God, there's just too many to name. They know who they are. It's the people that I text, the people that I call, the people that text me, the people that call me, who say my name when I'm not there and whose name I say when they're not there, people who seek opportunities for themselves and then leave the door open for others. There are so many of us doing that in podcasting. So thank you to them. Thank you to my care team, my therapist, my executive coach, people who just help me to unknot myself when I become a knot. Those people are really, really important to me. I mean, honestly, thank you to my close friends, my women tribe who just hold me down and who keep it real and who make fun of me and who also remind me of the higher purpose that I serve. Yeah, and then thank you to me. I think it's important to reflect that gratitude back to yourself. Thank you to me because I've endured, I've made really big sacrifices, and I have made room for me and for other people. And I'm really proud of that, because as a result, I've gotten to tell just incredible stories. I've gotten to meet incredible people. And so I'm very thankful to the person who I see in the mirror because she has to get up and do this every single day so I can live my dream,
What is your zone of genius?
Okay, you know what? I know the answer to this one because I joke about it all the time and my team rolls their eyes when I joke about it. But honestly, I work very hard. Like, I'm not even going to act like I don't work hard. I work very hard. But the one true talent that I have, like of all the things, my one true talent is knowing the goods when I see the goods. Like, I can spot a talented person in any room that I'm in, the true talented person. And I can identify that person, and then I can challenge that person to grow in ways that they feel supported and nurtured. And then they can really unleash their own genius. So that's my true talent. My true talent is knowing the goods when I see the goods and being able to nurture that in people.
What does self-care look like to you?
Good food, naps, working out 3 to 4 times a week, acupuncture twice a month, a lot of water. I buy water by the case. Long phone calls with my close friends, movie nights with my children on my bed, just snuggling them and eating homemade popcorn. A lot of quiet time. I'm an introvert, and so I need a lot of quiet time just by myself. Yeah. Oh, and monthly artist dates. I take myself on a monthly artist date, just me. So actually today I'm going to the Museum of Black History and Culture just by myself, and I'm so excited.
So, what is your biggest takeaway from our conversation today? What do you want the audience to leave with?
Oh, it's the same thing I always say, which is if I can do it, you can do it. Really, I always joke that all of the work and all of the sacrifices that I've made are available to anyone. And so if you really want it, you can absolutely do this. There's no mystery. There's just hard work.
What is the best decision you've made as a leader?
I've made multiple. Every single team member I've hired who's still with me. Those are the best decisions I've made.
What do you need right now that you don't have to move the needle forward?
Great question. So this year is our big year to scale up. And so I am looking for opportunities to do that in a significant way for the company. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it's a partnership. I don't know if it's an acquisition. I don't know if it's a big investment. I'm exploring that. So what I need is a way to really scale the company in 2023. That's what I'm looking for.
What brings you joy?
Music and singing and cooking and coloring and playing my puzzle games on my phone and having my children tell me unending stories about things that happened at school to the point that I lose track of what happened and who said what. Those things bring me just so much joy.
And what problem exists in the world today that you'd like to solve?
One, if I could, I would make girls' education compulsory and legally binding everywhere in the world. Because when we educate girls and women, we lift up millions of people generationally.
What breaks your heart?
My kids crying. I can't handle it. I just can't.
The word is listening. What is that resounding sound or message that your generation is saying we should be listening to?
So I'm a Gen Xer. So you know, we're we're the forgotten but very sassy sibling in in the generations. And I think our generation continues to say, get over yourself. I feel like that is the ethos of my entire Gen X generation. Like, get over yourself, like focus on the work, focus on other people. Like, what are you doing in the world?
What impact are you making daily?
Daily, I am raising two really wonderful human beings, and I am expanding what storytelling looks like in digital audio with my team.
Let's take a snapshot of the last 30 days. What was your biggest win?
The last 30 days. We got two new clients, very, very high profile clients that I can't really talk about yet. So those happened in the last 30 days. So that's on the professional side. And then my deputy, my number two, who runs the daily operations, stepped up to take on the editor role of our marquee project for this year. So I was so, so proud of her. And I love to see that. I love to see someone say, put me in, coach, put me in.
How do you celebrate the wins?
If it's a team win, I'll just be like, everybody, lunch is on me, get something really nice, and then let's eat it together during our meeting. Or I'm notorious for sending people random gifts. So like for everything from like an espresso maker to to like a Le Creuset pot. Like I try to pay attention to what people like and what they're into. And so I just keep a list. And then when they do something, I'll just send them some random gift that they're like, how do you even know that? And I'm like, because you mentioned it like 3 months ago in some meeting that we had, etc. So random gifts is big. I love to just have a moment, like if I'm by myself, of like playing one of my favorite songs and just blasting it and dancing around and singing and just very loudly thanking God and just being like, I see you, man. I see you. Okay, I see you.
If someone wrote an autobiography about you, what would the title be?
Well, if it was an autobiography, I'd have to write it. But if they wrote a biography, I think it would be titled, But She Did It Anyway.
Give us 3 truths that you've learned in life or business.
Oh my God. 3 truths. One is you have a lane. Stay in your lane, but make sure nobody can catch up to you in your lane. that has been so liberating for me. I just stay in my lane. You know, I see people to my left and to my right. I'm really happy for them, but I stay in my lane. And staying in my lane has been so important to our success because there are things that we do really well. And if we stay in that lane, we continue to do those things even better year after year. So that's one. The second one is be someone who makes room, not someone who takes up room. I have become very discerning very quickly about people who just take up space instead of trying to make space where they are. And I hope that my intention of always being someone who makes space is very obvious and that I am succeeding at that. So be someone who makes space, not takes up space. And then, you know, the third one, and this is like a really simple but transformative thing that I've adopted over the last 3 or 4 years, which is we celebrate our mistakes. I call them beautiful mistakes. And so as a team, we talk about, okay, someone made a beautiful mistake last week. Let's go through it. How did we make this mistake? What information didn't we have? What assumptions did we make? And how do we learn from this? And in a creative environment like ours, celebrating the beautiful mistakes has just allowed people to be even more comfortable experimenting and trying things. Because worst case scenario is you make a beautiful mistake and we learn from it.
If you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I want you to ask the question and answer it.
What is the one question I would have asked? Well, I always like to know where people are headed. Like I always, not literally, like not like, are you going to lunch after? But like where are you headed with what you're doing now? Right? Like, because especially entrepreneurs, we always have, 18 other things on the to-do list. Always. If you don't have 18 other things on your to-do list, you are not an entrepreneur. You're a hobbyist. Because we love to be overworked. I know you're rolling your eyes and nodding in case people can't see you. So where am I headed? I am headed to growing my company significantly in the next 12 to 18 months. Not sure how, but I'm also headed to being a published author. I am working on a book right now. And so that's where I'm headed in the next 24 months, hopefully.
Can you share about the book a little bit?
Not yet, because I'm still working on the proposal. But I will let you know when and if, God willing, this all happens.
Thank you for that. We've come to the part of our interview. It's called Rapid Round of Fun. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you to give us very quick answers. And if there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Rapid Round of Fun?
I'm ready.
Your ideal car?
A hybrid.
You relax doing what?
Napping.
Your comfort food?
Pizza.
The last movie you saw?
The Menu.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
Shakira.
Your favorite dance song?
Never Gonna Dance Again by Pink. No, Never Not Gonna Dance Again by Pink.
Workout or hit the couch?
Workout.
Juleyka, thank you so much for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you and to do business with you, and feel free to leave all your social media handles.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. This was such a fun interview. Really, like kudos. You were so fun to talk to. Thank you. So I'm on all the social media, Juleyka Lantigua, on Twitter, on Instagram, at Facebook. And if you want to do business with me, just email me, juleyka@lwcstudios.com.
Thank you. That's a wrap.
Thank you.